Hi, it's Natasha N.K.O, 27th of June, 26, 13:26 p.m. Brothers and sisters again. Reading the next chapter, which is chapter 7. I'm not going to reread the final paragraph of the previous chapter because this book, each chapter is a completely different scene and scenario, and it's a bigger book. And I have put the photo of the first and last pages of chapter 6, and I'll do that for 7 as well. So, chapter 7. On Saturday, Mallory stood outside her parents' home, the house they fled to when they escaped the onslaught of coloured who began encroaching upon Park West. The 4-bedroom ranch with its picture window in the living room was identical to the surrounding houses in Arroyo, Arroyo, one of the many suburbs that sprang up in the 50s and early 60s after neighbourhoods in the city began to integrate and industries began to relocate further from Los Angeles. More than once since she'd grown up, Mallory had parked her car in the wrong driveway, only to discover her mistake when she reached the front door. Her own townhouse was less than 20 minutes away, but she came to her parents' home only when she was summoned. It was barely past noon, but already the temperature was in the 90s, at least 10 degrees hotter than in the city. But the heat in Los Angeles was not only weather. Only that morning, Mallory had turned on the news and heard that fighting had broken out between black, Latino, and white prisoners in one of the city jails. As she turned off the radio, once more the spectre of Reginald Denny, his crumpled white body sprawled in the streets of South Central, rose in her mind. Were such attacks going to become common? She shuddered. Now at her parents' door, Mallory felt removed from the problems of the city. The thick air around her was clogged with bits of ash from the fires that were still roaring in the Angeles forest, not 10 miles away. As she looked into the heavy sky, she didn't see one bird. During the heat wave, her parents' automatic sprinklers came on early every morning, but as Mallory looked at the front lawn, there was no indication that the grass had been watered at all. The entire neighbourhood seemed scorched, as though an invisible fire-breathing dragon had gone on a rampage. For as long as Mallory could remember, her mother was constantly redecorating their house. She could see that it had been painted since her last visit. Peering through the large picture window, she saw new carpeting and drapes. Mallory pulled the brim of her Lakers cap down low on her forehead. She had her key, but she rang the bell 3 times before it dawned on her that no one was coming to open the door because everyone was already out back for the barbecue. As Mallory walked around the house, the scent of the flowers was every bit as strong as the odour of steaks and chicken sizzling on the grill. Mallory, sweetheart, oh, you're so skinny. Her mother hugged her, held her long enough and tightly enough so that Mallory could smell both her Chloe and her scotch. She pulled away first, as she always did when her mother embraced her. Oh, sweetheart, you didn't get dressed up. Daddy will be so disappointed. She whispered the last, her voice tinged with a slight edge of apprehension, of hysteria, the voice of a woman who asked how much she could spend, who looked over her shoulder as she whispered into the telephone. Mallory smiled at the older woman. She was wearing a plaid shirt with piping along the shoulders, a buckskin skirt with fringes, brown leather boots, and a cowgirl hat. Her dark eyes were framed by deep lines, and the tilted hat didn't totally cover her grey hair. She looked like an aging Annie Oakley. Mallory's here, her mother called out gaily to the rest of the people. Glancing around the yard, Mallory saw that her father, her brother, Jonathan and his wife Sharon, as well as the neighbours from either side and across the street were all dressed in Western style, the usual theme of her parents' Columbus Day barbecue. Go tell Daddy you forgot, her mother whispered. Mallory could see her silent message in her eyes. Ask him to forgive you. I forgot it was Western, Dad. Sorry, Mallory said to her father as he barbecued. He was a big man, a hulking John Wayne type, whose size had always made her feel small and insignificant. She stood in front of her father, as stiff and wooden as a puppet. He was wearing a sky blue shirt that had fringes hanging from the sleeves. Over that was a fake suede vest with a tin star pinned to the flap, just below his Bush for President button. Strapped to his waist was a holster bearing 2 huge guns. For a fleeting moment, Mallory wondered whether or not they were loaded. He was standing over the grill, a huge barrel-shaped contraption, spreading barbecue sauce on the steaks and chicken. His big hands moved back and forth in a fluid rhythm. Her father's hands always seemed to be wrapped around something, holding something. They'd never held her. She had to stand on tiptoe to brush his cheek with her lips. He didn't bend down, but he did turn and look at her, taking in her khaki shorts and white t-shirt in a quick, dismissive glance. It was a small thing to remember, Mallory. Your brother didn't forget, he said. He didn't stop what he was doing to return her kiss. Mallory squinted as plumes of smoky air blew in her direction. She felt a scream racing to her throat, but instead swallowed hard as she often had to do when she came home. I'll go say hello to everybody, she said softly. Her father didn't respond. She walked across the yard feeling lost and lonely. Only her father could make her feel so. She remembered a parents' night when she was in the 5th grade, Jonathan in the 1st. She held her mother's hand, her excitement growing like a flower in her chest as they neared her classroom. She had a spelling test with a bright gold star on it tacked up on a bulletin board. The teacher had posted her A+ math test in the back of the room, and on the side, under the window, her science project was on display. She'd received an A+ for that too. As they approached her class, her heart was pounding, because her father had never come to parents' night before, not when she was in the 1st or the 2nd, the 3rd or the 4th grade. More than anything, she wanted her father to see her beautiful papers, to hear the lovely things her teachers had to say about her. She wanted him to know that she was smart, that she was in the advanced section. Her mother knew all these things. Her mother came to the school every year. Maybe if her father discovered what a good girl she was, what a bright girl, he would pay more attention to her. Maybe he would muss her hair the way he did Jonathan's. Perhaps he would ride her on his shoulders too. And so, as they neared her classroom, she began running, pulling her mother by the hand, rushing them toward the open door, praying that once they were inside, the magic would happen. But they didn't go inside the door to her class. Instead, they walked right past it, down the hall to Jonathan's classroom, where they sat until the bell rang to warn them that there were only 10 minutes left of parents' night. Her mother and father left her brother's classroom, and she could remember her shoes scraping against the cement floor as they trudged down the hall to her room. Her hair kept falling in her eyes and mouth as she ran because she was laughing, and then she heard her father's heavy footsteps stop, and he told her mother to go ahead, that Jonathan was tired. He would stay with Jonathan. He said, go on, we'll meet you at the car. She remembered the way her heart lurched in her chest, hammering away so hard it hurt to breathe. She wanted to scream at her mother, make him come, you make him come see my stars. But her mother nodded in a way that was barely a movement at all and took her by the hand, and once again it was just the two of them. She wore a blue dress with flowers on the bodice that night so long ago. She wore a blue dress with flowers on the bodice that night so long ago, and what Mallory remembered most deeply about her 5th grade parents' night was how dark the blue of the flowers became when they were wet. As she neared the canvas-covered brick patio, Mallory could hear the neighbours' voices rising in debate. Oh, he's a crackpot, a rich, big-eared crackpot. He's got as much chance of being president as a snowball in hell. Well, I like him. This country needs a businessman. How's running a business going to help him when Saddam Hussein declares World War III? I tell ya, we need to stick with Bush. Give the man 4 more years and he'll straighten out the economy. She heard her brother's voice. What I want to know is who's going to stop all these wetbacks from coming in here and getting on welfare with the blacks. That's the man I'm voting for. Mallory, her brother called out as soon as she was near. He was tall like their father and had to bend down to hug her. His dark spiky hair smelled like coconut. He had been born after her father had 4 daughters with his first wife and another with his second. She'd seen her half-sisters 3 times during her childhood, the same number of times her father saw them after his divorce. He had no need of daughters after his son was born. It didn't matter that Jonathan was in and out of jail and on and off drugs. He was the chosen one. She was one of 5 disappointments. She begged for her father's love. Her brother squandered it. Somebody get Mallory a beer, Jonathan said loudly. Mallory, who hadn't seen her childhood neighbours in months, greeted everyone, pausing to hear stories about their families, to answer their careful questions about the life of a 30-something-year-old woman that didn't include marriage and little ones. She was chatting with her sister-in-law when warm fingers grasped Mallory's wrist and gently pulled her away. "Hi, stranger." "Susan!" The two women hugged tightly for a few moments. "I never see you any more," her friend Susan pouted just a little. The accusation stung, not because it wasn't true, but because Mallory had been dreading it so much. She thought of Susan as her best friend, but they didn't get together very often anymore, and Mallory had broken the last 2 dates they'd made. "Oh, don't fuss. You know you still love me," she said playfully. Then she bent down and kissed the two small girls who clung to each leg of Susan's jeans. "Hi, pumpkins." She looked up at Susan, who was smiling. God, they're really getting big. Two sets of big brown eyes stared back at her without blinking. "How's the big-time executive?" Mallory stood up and faced Philip, Susan's husband. His lips managed to curl into a smile, but his eyes were cold. He moved closer to Susan and put his arm around her in a way that forced her to turn her body toward him. What a jerk, Mallory thought. The smile she gave him was just as phony as his. Her eyes were every bit as unfriendly. "What can I tell you, Philip? I'm making more money than most men I know. I'm happy." Mallory smirked inwardly as a brief shadow crossed Philip's face and dimmed his smile. "Gotcha, you little asshole." But Philip's eyes gleamed maliciously. "I don't know, Mal," he said. "While you're making all that money, your old biological clock is just ticking away. You'll never catch up to Susie. Did she tell you we're expecting another blessed event?" Well, "Philip," Susan said, "I wanted to tell her myself. Sue would never have a fancy schmancy career. She's just a good old-fashioned girl," Philip said, still smiling. He raked his fingers through his short brown hair. "Congratulations," Mallory said softly. "I'll have babies," she told herself. She looked at Susan, who averted her eyes. What could she be thinking of? The last time she talked to her friend, she was planning on going back to school, getting her degree. They'd discussed her goals for hours, and Mallory had carefully advised her where to apply, what courses to take, and now she was pregnant? Again? "Gotta get me a boy," Philip said. He put his hands on his wife's belly and squeezed it softly. The gesture was so intimate that Mallory looked away in embarrassment. "Phil!" Susan pushed his hands away, but there was pleasure in the eyes that met Mallory's, a smug satisfaction that Mallory felt was designed to elicit envy. And she did envy Susan. She had a family. The loud, tinny sound of a triangle being hit with a metal mallet permeated the eye. Permeate, to go through, like, I don't know, like a smell permeates the room, yeah? The loud, tinny sound of a triangle being hit with a metal mallet permeated the yard. Mallory looked toward the barbecue grill. There was a table next to it, and her mother was standing there, arranging the side dishes of potato salad, baked beans, and corn on the cob. Corn on the cob. Rolls and pitchers of iced tea and lemonade. "Come and get it, partners," her father called out, his voice deep and harsh. "Hon, would you get me a plate? And make sure the meat's medium," Philip said. "I'll watch the kids for you." "It was an accident," Susan whispered as they walked toward the food. "Look, I think it's really great," Mallory lied. You're such a wonderful mother, Sue. Really, I think it's great." How, she wondered, could her friend be so passive? Susan grinned at her, and Mallory realised that she was actually happy to have another baby with her jerk of a husband. "If the new baby's a boy, I'm finished. I told Phil I'm getting my tubes tied," Susan giggled. "Of course, he hit the ceiling. The man is crazy about kids. His business is doing really well, so..." "Can you believe that Lindsay will be going to school next year? So tell me who you're seeing, Mal." Mallory hesitated. She always meant to tell Susan about Hayden, but somehow she never did. Listening to her friend chatter about her third baby, about schools and her husband, she felt the way she often did around her. They lived in two separate worlds. "I'm dating several guys, nothing serious. The job, my career keeps me so busy. I have a lot more responsibility these days." "You're so glamorous, Mal. So thin. I'll never be thin again." Susan slapped her thick thighs with her palms. For a moment, Mallory relished her friend's envy, but at the same time, when she looked at Susan's red hair and freckles, her sweet, childlike face, she remembered their days as girls. There was a time when neither of them could imagine life without the other. There was so much she wanted to tell her. "Let's go talk in my room for a few minutes," Mallory said, grabbing Susan's hand. "I have to fix Philip's—" "Oh, come on, he can survive for a few minutes." The house was blessedly cool, thanks to central air conditioning. Mallory's old bedroom had been turned into a kind of office gym, but her old twin bed was still there, and from force of habit, that's where Mallory led her friend. "I ran into Steve McPherson last week," Susan said, settling herself in one corner of the bed across from her friend. Mallory squealed at the mention of her high school boyfriend's name. "Oh, God, how's he doing?" "He looks great. He asked about you." "He did? What did he say?" Mallory pressed against Susan's arm. "Steve McPherson. My God," she thought. "Is he still married?" The door creaked as it opened. The two women looked up at the same time. "Hey, here's Mummy. She's talking with her executive girlfriend. I guess she doesn't care that her family is starving." Philip stood in the doorway. He had one little girl in his arms, and the other was holding his hand. The children were crying softly. Susan got up from the bed and took the youngest child from her husband. "What's the matter?" she cooed. Mallory cooed, C-O-O-E-D, like coo coo when you soothe a baby. "What's the matter?" she cooed. Mallory watched as the baby put her arms around her mother's neck. Sue swayed a little to rock her, and the whimpers quieted down. Mallory wondered what it would feel like to have that kind of power, to touch a child and have her tears disappear. She felt an ache in her back where her spine was pressed up against the hard wood of the headboard. "Come on," Susan said to Philip. She looked back at Mallory and smiled wistfully. "I'll see you outside," she said. Susan and Philip's footsteps were soft on the carpet. When Mallory couldn't hear them any longer, she let her head fall back against her pillow. She opened a window. The aroma of barbecued beef and chicken and the sound of Hank Williams singing "Your Cheating Heart" wafted up. Her mother's laughter floated across the yard, a mildly hysterical blend of coughing and cackling that meant she'd had one scotch too many. Mallory looked at her watch. In 10 minutes it would be 3:00. At 3:00, she would do what she always did on these occasions. What was required? She'd go downstairs and eat her father's barbecue and pretend not to see her mother getting drunk. And when she couldn't pretend any longer, she'd go home. There was a telephone next to her bed. Hayden was probably on the golf course now. That's how he spent his Saturday afternoons. Even if he were at home, she couldn't call him there. Tears welled up in her eyes. She pinched her arm as hard as she could. "Don't you dare cry. Don't you dare." Mallory thought about how she'd bawled in Esther's car. For a fleeting moment, she wondered what the black woman was doing on a hot Saturday afternoon. She wished she had her number. She wished she had her strength. From the bedroom window, Mallory could see the smoke still rising from the barbecue grill. Her mother looked happy, standing next to her father behind a table that was crowded with all the good things she'd cooked. Her mother was spooning food onto Jonathan's plate. Mallory heard her father laugh for the first time that day as he told her mother, "Give the boy more." Mallory closed the window. Already the oppressive heat from the still, heavy air had seeped into the small room. 10 minutes, she told herself. In 10 minutes, she'd go down. That is the end of chapter 7. Thanks for listening.